Hello, tea friends. Yi cha hui yo. Through tea, make friends. Welcome back to our ongoing series, Brewing Tea, where we discuss the history, lore, and practicalities of tea brewing, all with the aims of improving your tea practice. This week, we're going to be talking about bowl tea and Gongfu tea, how they work together, what makes them different, and how to use them in your practice. So have a seat, get out a bowl and a cup, and join me as we jump into bowl tea and Gongfu tea. In our tradition, we practice 5 brewing methods, 3 types of bowl tea, Gongfu tea, and whisk tea. Today, we're not going to be talking about whisk tea, we're going to be talking about Gongfu tea and bowl tea. And we're not going to be demonstrating or talking about all the steps in any of the 3 kinds of bowl tea or Gongfu tea. We'll save those for later videos. I promise in later videos, we will get into the details of all 3 types of bowl tea and Gongfu tea. Today, I want to talk about their relationship and how they work together, a little bit about where they come from, though not a detailed exploration of their history either. That will also come in later videos. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about the way that they work together, what their purpose is, and how they stay next to each other and create the fire of a tea practice. And I say fire because there's a really good analogy which relates to charcoal. When we're making charcoal fire for tea, we always remember that, you know, a single piece of charcoal is not that hot. It's 2 pieces of charcoal near each other and there's space between them that creates the flame that heats our water for tea. In the same way, Gongfu tea and bowl tea really function when they're kept distinct but put together, right? Having both of these in my tea practice and in my tea life is such a benefit. It brings so much joy and helps me in so many ways. And I can see the effects of those who only have one or the other and how they're limited in certain ways. And having both in our tradition is such a boon, such a blessing to have. Bowl tea is the older of the 2. There are 3 types of bowl tea that we practice. One is leaves in a bowl, one is side handle brewing, and one is boiling tea. All 3 of those are really important, and they're all 3 very ancient and go back a long time. A really simple way of looking at this is to say that bowl tea is more relaxed, more ceremonial, more meditative, less about the tea, more about us, whether that be as individuals seeking some meditative peace through our tea practice, or as a group sitting in harmony and silence and connecting to each other and to nature and of course to ourselves. Gongfu tea, on the other hand, is about sensitivity, subtlety. It's about refinement. Gongfu means mastery. It means skillful mastery through self-discipline. So Gongfu tea is about learning and growing and continually improving and creating the finest cup of tea possible, always pursuing that perfect cup, which is in itself impossible, but it's great to have ideals that we can never reach so that we continue to strive and grow throughout our entire lives. Bowl tea, we could say, is about equanimity, and Gongfu tea is about sensitivity. So these 2 work together in harmony. And when you think of them in those terms, equanimity and sensitivity, actually, these are the wings to awakening in Buddhism as well. The Buddha spoke about equanimity and sensitivity as the wings to awakening, and how we need to cultivate equanimity, which is an ability to accept things as they are, to just be with things as they are, to not fight against reality, but allow it to be and see it more clearly. And sensitivity, which is to experience more and greater depth and greater understanding and wisdom. Too much of either one, and we get off balance. If we get really sensitive and we don't have equanimity, then we will react. If we aren't able to be peaceful and equanimous with the degree of sensitivity we have now, increasing it will mean that we will react more and we'll continue to react more and more and more. And that's not healthy for us. Similarly, if we're very equanimous but have no sensitivity, we're not really awake. That's kind of like a sleep state or someone who's on heavy drugs. They're at peace and they're calm, but they're also not awake. And so you could poke them and they don't really feel anything, so they're not really there. So we want to have both of these things rise together. And this is how bold tea and Gongfu tea work together as a practice. We create a sensitivity to tea. This could include, we could open this up, and it could include an exploration into tea knowledge, understanding the types of tea, how they're processed, where they come from, understanding all the linear information that is out there about tea, cultivating that, and also improving your skills. And not just, by copying or aping, but by doing experiments. In our tradition, we practice a lot of experimentation in our Gongfu tea so that we can realize experientially why we brew tea like this versus like this, and continue to experiment and grow and learn and try different things. And that way we have an evolving and growing tradition that is actually hundreds of years old. We can honor tea in that way by bringing it to its highest potential, because tea leaves arrive to us and they are unfinished. They are like the ingredients that need to be put together and cooked into a delicious meal. Of course, you have to start with the right ingredients. This is why cooks in really nice, high-quality restaurants, they do their own shopping. They don't even trust their sous chefs. They go to the market themselves because you need really high-quality ingredients, which is to say, in our case, we need really good, high-quality tea. But then you need to prepare it well. Right? You need to be able to put it together with skill. And that's what Gongfu tea is doing. It's honoring tea by bringing it to its highest potential. Bold tea, on the other hand, right, is about just allowing the tea to be whatever it is. In bold tea, the materials aren't so essential. The methods aren't so essential, right? It doesn't matter if the tea's too hot or too cold, there's too many leaves or too little, too bitter, too strong. Let go of all those twos. You could think of it in this way. In bold tea, we're letting go of the qualitative mind. We're letting go of the evaluatory mind and getting into a state of equanimity, just being with the tea, right? Communicating with the tea, non-verbally, not in some kind of foo-foo or spiritual way, but actually communicating bodily to the actual aromas, not labels or descriptive terms in our head that are our attempts to conceptualize the flavors that we're experiencing, the aromas, but the actual aromas unpacked and the actual bodily sensations and feelings and then beyond. And so bold tea is about a relaxation, and Gongfu tea is about hypersensitivity and a growing focus, right? And they work together in this beautiful, beautiful dance. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is how we choose a tea for any given session. And there's a lot that goes into that. The weather, if you know what your guests have eaten, what kind of guests you have, what kind of session are you going to have? A casual one where we have a chat and hang out, or a deep and meditative one. These are all relevant. What kind of tea you want to make. But one of the key factors that goes into choosing what kind of tea we're going to prepare and how we're going to make our chashi is which of the 5 brewing methods we're going to use. One of the 3 bold teas, Gongfu tea, whisk tea, which of the brewing methods also is a determining factor in which tea we're going to choose and the chashi that we're going to make. Each of these chashis requires different form, because the movements of our body are very different, right? In bold tea, we use a lot of big muscle groups because bold tea is a relaxation. It's a movement into equanimity. So when we brew bold tea, we're using big muscle groups. We're using the arms and shoulders. Gongfu tea is more refined and subtle, so it's a lot of small muscle groups, right? And Gongfu tea requires different teaware out. So not only is there different movements, but there's different teaware on the table. And so you're moving differently and you have different teaware arranged in a different way than you do for bold tea. So knowing your brewing method, Gongfu or bold tea, will determine in part what tea you're going to brew and also how you're going to arrange your chashi. Bold tea and Gongfu tea, their magic, like the charcoal, is the space between them. The space between them is what gives them power. But what that also means is that we have to keep them distinct. It's their distinctness that creates that space, that creates that fire, that creates their usefulness in the practice and life of a chajin. So keeping them separate is really important. And this is why you'll often hear me joking about why I don't appreciate for myself and for my students, I don't appreciate teaware that smushes or blends the boundaries of these two. A good example of that is what we call bups, something that's not a cup and it's not a bowl, it's something in between, and you've now kind of smushed bold tea and Gongfu tea. And as a guest, of course, I can always appreciate whatever tea anyone serves to me. That's my role as a guest, is to connect to the heart of the kindness and hospitality of my host, who's offering me tea, not to sit there in a snobby way and say, oh, this tea's not good enough or their brewing method's not good enough, but to sit and enjoy. But at the same time, just to take a step back, as a tea lover, when you use those kinds of teaware that mush things together, it's hard for me to know how to be in that ceremony, how to relate, how to sit, how to be, because they both have such very, very different energies. And so when we smush them together, part of the mind wants to turn on the qualitative part of your mind that wants to say, like, oh, this cup, is shaped improperly for Gongfu tea. It shouldn't be like this. It should be porcelain. It should be this. It should be shaped like a tulip. It should, blah, 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 because we've done the experiments and we ourselves, not because Buddha says or my teacher says or his teacher says, but because we've experimented and we know these things. And then on the other hand, there's the bowl tea part of the mind that wants to just let go and be okay. So both of those are there and competing when we have those things mushed up, right? We have to keep them separate. Also, keeping them separate honors the lineages from which they come. It's like if we were making a fusion album in music and we had studied some African drumming, and then we had gone and studied flamenco guitar from real old school flamenco guitar teachers, and we wanted to make an album that brought these two things together. Of course, we want both of our teachers, our African drum teacher, our flamenco teacher, we want them to be proud of what we've done. We want them to look at the album and tell their friends, look at what they've done with our beautiful flamenco. Look at this cool new album. We don't want them to feel like, what have they done with our flamenco? They've mixed it up and mushed it up. We don't want that. We want the evolution and change and growth of our tradition as it moves forward generation to generation to be just that, a positive evolution that honors the past and grows towards the future in powerful ways, and that those evolutions come out of the spirit of the practice, out of the brewing method itself, not out of our whims or the things that we happen to be able to find, etc. But out of the spirit of that thing. That's how we evolve and grow, through understanding. So it's really important that these two things remain distinct and apart from each other. And in that way, you'll find that you get that charge between them and you get that ability that really makes them work so well together. Bowl tea picks up where Gongfu tea leaves off, and Gongfu tea picks up where bowl tea leaves off. And they allow you to explore a much larger territory of tea, a much larger territory of the world of tea and the practice of tea when you have both of them working together distinctly but close together. Of course, this doesn't mean that they don't overlap, that Gongfu is pure function and bowl tea is pure aesthetics, and that the method and the teaware just absolutely don't matter at all in bowl tea because it's just about meditative ceremonial space. That's not true. There is some form in it. There are some practical elements of the proper design of the side handle, the best bowl and the best shape of the bowl, and all of those practical details, which we'll get into later in other videos. And in Gongfu tea also, there are aesthetic things, and Gongfu tea can also be very meditative. It can also be deep and powerful and create a ceremonial space. So they certainly overlap. They certainly overlap, but keeping them apart means more keeping the methods apart, keeping the respective teaware apart, the respective chashi apart, and the respective approach apart. That's very, very important. And so that we can make sure that we honor the lineages of both of them, and also so that they will create that space that works so well together and expands our ability to practice and share tea with others. Having both of these things in my life as a Chajin has brought me tremendous growth and a tremendous amount of joy, and also helped me in so many ways. Because I find that, like the equanimity and sensitivity that we spoke about, bowl tea and Gongfu tea work so well when they are in perfect balance. If you have too much Gongfu tea, you start to get snobby. You start to get hypercritical, hyper-focused. And there are a lot of tea snobs in the world, unfortunately, and that element of tea can make tea sometimes unpleasant. Sometimes you go to a place and there's really expensive tea worth thousands of dollars and experts there, and the experience is not very enjoyable. I've had some of my best sessions in my life in the mountains with a monk in Japan, for example. The two of us were drinking tea out of a Hello Kitty teapot and one cracked bowl, and he didn't know anything about tea. And so those were some of the most transcendental tea sessions of my life. And then I've had those sessions with tea that was worth thousands of dollars, and the greatest experts of the tea world there. And I left feeling like the tea was a little underappreciated. You know, maybe some dear friend invites us over to their house, and they've opened their home and their hospitality and their heart to us, and we have a chance to connect. And we miss that chance to connect because we're caught up too much in our evaluatory process, looking at them and thinking, oh, this tea's not good enough, it's not to my taste, and that brewing method's not good enough. You know, I want to be able to shut all that off. And because I practice bold tea, I can shut it off. I can shut it off and just show up and drink their tea and enjoy their tea and their hospitality and connect to them right away. But too much bold tea, and we become kind of tea guzzlers. We just, you know, guzzle tea for years and years, and we don't increase our sensitivity or our understanding of tea or our skill. And it's, you know, that's a bit like getting into music but never really learning the instrument or really learning how to play, just learning 2 chords and playing those over and over and over again. You're missing out also on a lot of dimensions of tea, and you start to, you know, you're also incapable of really describing your experience or passing on your experience or answering the questions of your guests after a ceremony when they ask you about the tea that you've prepared and about the experience itself. So we really need to work with these 2 things together. And when they are together, you have you really much stronger and healthier tea practice. In the great library of tea wisdom and tea stories, there's one story that captures very, very, very clearly the difference between bold tea and Gongfu tea and how they relate to each other. And it also happens to be one of my favorite tea stories, so I'm really happy to be able to share it with you. It's about Rikyo, who is one of the constellations in the tea world, one of the greatest tea masters of all time. He lived several centuries ago in Japan, and he lived in feudal Japan in a society that was very stratified. So there was nobles and peasants, and they didn't really react or interact with each other very much. And he, of course, was a noble. He was the tea master to the shogun and got to participate in even serving tea to the emperor. So he was, you know, very high lord and had his own school. And of course, in those days, for someone wealthy like him, everything would be delivered to the kitchen door that the people needed on a daily level. And the servants and household staff and all that would have been there to receive all those deliveries. For some reason, we don't know why, Rikyo became enamored with the fishmonger who delivered the fish to his compound every day. They grew to be close friends. You can imagine that fisherman in the beginning being so nervous. The lord of the house himself wants to talk to me, what? You know, and looking down at his shoes, not knowing what to say. But over time, they began to get closer and closer, and that washed away, and they developed a familiarity, and they would sit in the kitchen and sip boiled tea, sencha, simmered tea, and sip bowls of it and talk. And Rikyo loved him and instructed the servants that anytime I'm not with a guest or busy, if he comes, I want to be there to receive the fish and have a chat. And so the 2 of them would chat like that. And over time, they became very close. And then one day, Rikyo began to notice that there was something on the fisherman's mind. He had something he wanted to ask Rikyo. He needed something. He assumed he needed money. So he waited for the right opportunity because he could tell that the fisherman wasn't going to ask because their society is very polite. So eventually, he found the right opportunity and he said, you know, I can tell there's something on your mind. You know, what is it? Go ahead and tell me. We're brothers. Do you need help? I'm happy to help you. And the fisherman looked down. He was very nervous. Well, yes, there is something I've been meaning to ask you, but I know you'll say no. That's why I didn't ask. But you see, my wife, she keeps nagging again and again. And well, it's on my mind. It's just that, well, we would love to have you to our home for tea. And Rikyo's eyes lit up. He was so happy. Yes, of course. I would love to come to your home for tea. And so they set a date. And on that day, Rikyo gave the fisherman a very special gift. He brought one of his highest students. Now, Rikyo's students were also all nobles like him. They were the sons of samurais. They were wealthy landlords. And so taking along one of his senior students was a powerful gift because what he was saying to the fisherman was, I'm not ashamed of our relationship. I don't care. It's not some secret just for the kitchen. I'm showing it to the world that you're my friend. And that was a very, very powerful statement and a very powerful honor. And so the 2 of them went to the fisherman's hut. They drank some simple tea, ate a small meal, and they left. And after the gate closed and the fisherman went back inside and they had walked a little bit into the street, Rikyo stopped and put his hand on his heart, closed his eyes and sighed with a big smile and said, that was one of the most transcendental tea sessions of my entire life. And then started walking home. The student was blown away by this. He was incredibly confused. This man had served tea to the emperor. He'd served tea in beautiful forests and monasteries at the end of retreats. He's had all these epic tea sessions when flowers were in bloom in all these amazing places. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. When they were about halfway home, he stopped his teacher and said, "Master, I don't understand. How could that have been one of your most transcendental tea sessions? That man did everything wrong. He had the bowl in the wrong place. All the teaware was organized improperly. His skills were all done very, very casually and not in the way that you teach us. He whisked the tea poorly. The tea itself was lower quality and it was gritty, and everything about the whole ceremony was improper according to all the teachings that you have given to us. So how could that be one of your most transcendental tea sessions? How could it be?" And Rikyo looked his student deeply in the eyes and he said, "That man did not invite us to his home to demonstrate his tea brewing skills." Now, the story ends there. But actually, if you push the story forward, you understand a lot about Zen and a lot about Gongfu Tea and Bowl Tea, because you better believe the very next day, Rikyu would be scolding his students for not doing it properly. So here you have one of the greatest masters in all the history of tea, a constellation, really, in our sky, who knows deeply all the skills and how to teach them, and is on his students about doing it properly. But he's able to set all that down and connect heart to heart in the true spirit of tea. He hasn't lost that. Now, these are the relationship between Bowl Tea and Gongfu Tea. And if you really want them to work well, you understand that relationship, you understand that dynamic, and you understand also to honor them and keep them apart, not blend them or mix them with any kind of teaware or chahashi or method that sloppily infuses one with the other. Because it's when the methods are kept apart that they really function and allow you so much more room for growth and depth in your tea practice. It's our commitment in these videos every week to give you some homework that go along with the lessons so that you can practice and grow during the week, and share in the comments below about what doing that homework does for you. We can have an ongoing discussion in the comments here in the video and talk about it and talk about our learning and sharing and growing together. Of course, the homework for this week will be to brew Gongfu Tea and Bowl Tea and notice the differences. Notice the differences in the muscle groups and how you're using finer muscle groups for Gongfu Tea and how that affects your mind and its sharpness, and how you relax more in Bowl Tea and let go. Notice maybe which of your teas is more suitable for one or the other. Most teas can be Bowl Tea or Gongfu Tea, but they might be more suitable for one or the other. And if you pick that up, you'll be picking up also part of what makes that brewing method what it is. If you can find why a particular tea is more suitable to Bowl Tea or Gongfu Tea, you will, in other words, understand a little bit more about the purpose and effect and use of that particular brewing method. So try to focus on all the differences and the ways they work together. If you want to do an experiment where you do blend a little bit together, be naughty. It's great, you know, be naughty, break the rules a little bit, blend a little bit of Bowl Tea and Gongfu Tea, see what happens when you do, and see what the effect is. And I think you'll find that it's much better when they are kept pure and separate and used in a practice in that way. If you'd like to support these videos, go to globalteahut.org and subscribe to our magazine. Every month, you'll receive a 60-page ad-free magazine that covers tea from every perspective, including history, science, folklore, ethnography, tea processing, teaware, and you'll learn a ton with these 12 issues every year. Of course, you can't learn about tea just from reading. Every issue also comes with a few brews of a tea, so you can drink tea with people all over the world and learn about tea through that as well. And of course, it comes with an app also, so you can connect to that tea community, host tea gatherings, go visit other people and visit their tea gatherings, ask questions about teaware, about Gongfu Tea and Bowl Tea and all the things that we're covering in these videos and more. And all of the proceeds from that are going to be used in a nonprofit way to support our tea center, which you yourself can also visit. We host 2 10-day courses every month. You can find out more at teasagehut.org and come visit us and stay with us and go much deeper into this practice. Also, we have a huge array of Gongfu teaware and Bowl Tea teaware on our website. The proceeds from that all are saved and go towards building our future, bigger, brighter center called Light Meets Life. Thank you for joining me in this Brewing Tea series. Do your homework, make some comments below, get out a bowl, get out a cup, and enjoy some beautiful tea. After water, the most important element in tea preparation is fire. Join us next time on Brewing Tea as we explore fire, the teacher of tea.